I'm excited to speak with you all. One quick housekeeping item. We want to make sure that the slides are accessible to you all. And so we have a QR code here. And so if you take out your phones, open up the photo app, and let the phone do the magic, this QR code will take you to our slides, and you all will be able to access them and follow along from your phones if you don't want to look at the screen for whatever reason, and then you'll be able to reference them for later. So I'll give you all a couple seconds to do that. Yeah, we're excited to speak with you all about this strength-based approach to supporting youth mental health, some work that I've been fortunate to be a part of, as well as my co-author, Dr. Kelsie Reed. And if you all don't have this QR code, we'll make sure that you all get access to the slides after our discussion today. And so for those of you who don't know Kelsie and I, we want to just quickly share a little bit about us, who we are, and some of our work. I'm Byron McClure. I'm many things. I am a father, a brother, a husband. Professionally, I have been a nationally certified school psychologist, working in the public schools in the DMV area. If you're not familiar with the DMV, that's the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. That's home for me. After we left Chickasha, Oklahoma, moved to DC. So I can't really claim Chickasha because I was 2 when I left there. But DMV, that's home for me. That's what I know. And then I got to shout out Hampton because Krista is on this call. Then I went to the real, right? If we know the real Hampton University. But I did a bunch of, school, got the degrees, but I'm a man of the people, y'all. And I hope that you all are the people's people. And we're going to have a really good conversation today. So I'll share some of my experiences. I know we're a little tight on time, so I don't want to belabor talking about me. We're going to get to these slides. We're going to get to the work because that's what we're here for, to get this work. Are y'all ready to get this work? Put yes in the chat if you're ready to get this work today. Y'all gonna get it one way or another. But I want to introduce you all to my co-author, a very special person in the building, and that is Dr. Kelsie Reed. Kelsie, I'll throw it to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Byron. Yes, my name is Kelsie Reed. I am also a school psychologist. I'm in Maryland. I work at the elementary school level in Prince George's County Public Schools. I just saw someone put that in the chat. Yes. It's one of the largest school districts in the US. I have 3 schools, and so I service approximately 1,500 students. I was born and raised in Michigan and received my PhD from Loyola Chicago in 2020. And the majority of my work has focused on advancing educational equity, specifically as it relates to supporting the behavioral needs of students in a proactive manner rather than in a punitive one that punishes students. So I became passionate about disrupting deficit thinking when I realized how prevalent student and family blame is in our schools here in the US, and how this blame can cause incredible harm, not only for our students, and especially our students from marginalized backgrounds, but also in our work as educators. So I'm super excited to be here talking with you all today and learning from your experiences as practitioners in Canada. So as we speak about this topic and how our experiences have informed this approach, please chime in the chat to share your perspective so we can learn more about you. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. Move on to our learner objectives. So first, we are going to understand how deficit thinking might impact your work with youth. So we'll give you a brief overview of deficit thinking and share some examples of how it may manifest in our work with youth. Next, we'll introduce a strength-based approach, which we believe is the alternative to deficit thinking. So we will identify the key elements of a strength-based approach. And finally, we'll discover how to support youth mental health from a strength-based lens. And this is why we're here today. So we're going to be spending a lot of time, the majority of our time, on that third objective. So Byron has many rich experiences and examples of what this looks like in action. So he's going to walk us through some concrete real-life examples paired with practical tools you can begin using immediately. So to begin, we want to make this real for you. Everyone on this call works with children or students in some nature, right? And we work with students for a variety of reasons. And children bring with them a number of identities, backgrounds, experiences, and goals. So we have an example here that we're going to kind of rely on for a lot of this presentation. So meet Daunte. Daunte is a high school student, and here are a few things we know about him. He's currently in the foster care system due to the loss of his parents. His best friend was a victim of gun violence in 6th grade. He has diagnoses of anxiety and depression, and he's currently preparing to take the SAT. Now, I know we don't know everything about Daunte, but this is also oftentimes how referrals come in, right? So we know a few select things about a student, and then we're tasked with developing a plan to support the student. So with that said, we want to hear from you all in the chat. How might you support the mental health needs of a student like Daunte? So where would you begin, and what would you likely focus on in your role? We can go to the next slide, is it? Yes, so in your role, how might you support the mental health needs of a student like Daunte? And keep this in your head. For the sake of time, we're going to keep going, but I want the discussion in the chat, and we can always go back to it later on in the Q&A portion. So to dive into some of our content, I want to first remind you all that if we're not careful in our approach, it is highly possible for us to fall into a cycle of blame that hyper-focuses on Daunte's supposed weaknesses, especially based on the information that we've received about him. And again, this is often the case. So if a student is referred to us, the person who referred is likely to give us all of the quote unquote concerns, right? So he's struggling in this, he experienced this trauma, he needs this support. And this is historically how we view mental health supports, right? So let's dive in to our first learner objective, which is understanding the impact of deficit thinking on our work with youth. So we want to share the definition of deficit thinking that we collectively developed from the evidence base, paired with the perspectives of educators working on the ground. So to inform a lot of the words in our book, we relied on the perspectives of teachers, psychologists, and other school-based professionals. And the definition we came to for deficit thinking is a distorted lens focused on student weaknesses that blame students and their families for student difficulties, rather than acknowledging the impact of our practices and broader structural inequities. So we're going to break that down. First, we have a distorted and faulty lens. And I love this example that Byron has given before about glasses, so I'm gonna steal it. So I wear glasses. And if you understand prescriptions, just know that my eyes are around a -4. So I think that's pretty low. That number has been going down further and further every time I go get my eyes checked. So I can't see anything without my glasses or contacts. But the more we wear our glasses, and in the example Byron has given before, if you have kids who like to grab at your glasses, they get smudged up, right? So they can get filled with dirt, grease, grime, fingerprints, and those impact how we see the world. So if we don't take the time to clean them, our perception is warped. So with this distorted and faulty lens of deficit thinking, we're not seeing the full picture of our students based on a number of things. So our upbringing, stereotypes we've encountered over time, and our training. And this one is huge that we'll definitely touch on. And then finally, our biases. And the longer we don't clean our glasses or self-reflect and self-correct, the more harmful these beliefs become. Next, we have a hyper-focus on student weaknesses. So in the field of education and in the field of mental health, we have been primed and trained and lied to, honestly, that the only way to support students is to identify the worst in them and then hyper-focus on that weakness. And this is even more prevalent when working with students from historically marginalized backgrounds, because the quote unquote weaknesses we see are rooted in that faulty lens. Next, we have blame that's placed on students and families. So not only are we hyper-focusing on student weaknesses, we often unintentionally, right, place blame on the student. So they're lazy, which is why they're struggling. They have a disability, so it's not my fault they can't learn, or their parent is incarcerated, so their behaviors are expected. Those are some examples. And the problem with this is that it leads to us absolving responsibility for truly supporting the needs of our student and seeing them as a whole person. So if we allow ourselves to believe that these weaknesses are inherent to the child or out of our control, we may lower our expectations and not provide students with the best support. So blaming takes the responsibility off of us, and it leads to a hyper focus on the individual rather than examining the systemic contributors to the problem. So ultimately, if we want to go to the next slide, an essential belief of deficit ideology is that inequalities, so disparities in grades, disparities in suspension and expulsion rates, disparities in participation in AP classes, disparities in special education, are believed to result from intellectual, moral, cultural, or behavioral deficiencies that are supposedly inherent, that's a key word, inherent, in disenfranchised individuals and communities. So we're allowing ourselves to believe, subconsciously or consciously, that these disparities are okay because they're expected from these subgroups of students. And this is incredibly harmful because it essentially validates racism and eugenics, right? If you really think about it. So on to the next slide. To summarize, deficit thinking says that people are deficient rather than the systems we operate within, and blames student struggles on those supposed internal deficiencies. And it's a way to rationalize why some kids fail and others succeed. So our education system is founded on the idea that there's an average. And if you don't meet this average, there's something wrong with you. And in the field of mental health, this is very similar, right? So a deficit-based approach focuses on repairing mental illness rather than cultivating and fostering mental wellness. So identifying a child solely by whatever mental illness we've identified and hyper-focusing on that mental illness while ignoring the many strengths and other attributes of the child. And so why is this the case? Why are we so deficit-based? There are a number of reasons. Our education system was designed this way, first of all. So schools were originally created for white, middle-class, able-bodied males. And we haven't modified our approach to be inclusive of the needs and strengths of people who do not fit this mold. We were also trained this way. So whether you're a teacher, mental health professional, administrator, or whatever, we were told that in order to support the growth of a child, we must know what they can't do, and we must fix what they can't do. Our schools are not inclusive of differences. So oftentimes it's the structures, policies, and systems we have in place that contribute to the challenges we see. We need to change the way we operate, to truly welcome and value difference. And finally, it's truly easier to place blame elsewhere. So for example, and I'm so guilty of this, let's say I lose something and I was with my sister. I'll jump to a conclusion. I'll ask my sister if she had it last, or if she moved it, or if she accidentally threw it away, it couldn't be me, and it's the same is true in schools. It's much easier to jump to conclusions rather than taking the time to reflect on what we may have done to contribute to something. So I want to hear from all of you in the chat. Again, we can go back to this in the end. How might deficit thinking impact students like Daunte? You a couple of seconds to kind of think on that, reflect on that.
And Kelsie, I know that we're tight for time, but we got some really good responses.
Yes, please share them.
In some of the chat, and I just wanted to call some of them out. And let me know if I'm not saying the names correctly. It's important to be able to say names the right way. But Farah says, in response to the part about Daunte, sharing circles, counseling, and community building. There was one, Araba says, giving them a safe space to have somewhere to talk, share, and debrief. And so it seems that there were several responses along the lines of giving Daunte a safe space to express his needs. There was one, I love this from Jasmine, which was first find out what the needs are. So I think Jasmine is, she must have scrolled ahead in some of our slides, but we're going to get to that in a second as well. So great discussion coming through in the chat.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing those. So now let's shift into some of the key elements of a strength-based approach. So a strength-based approach values the skills, knowledge, connections, and potential of individuals or communities. So we're seeing the student or the client as a whole, vibrant human with a unique perspective and skill set that they individually bring to the world. And we want to cultivate that perspective and find ways to build upon it to allow them to feel seen, heard, valued, and capable of success. So a lot of the things that you're mentioning in the chat. And Byron and I want to be clear here. A strength-based approach does not mean that we are ignoring challenges, ignoring weaknesses, or operating from a mindset of toxic positivity, because that's just as harmful, right? Rather, we're equipping youth with the skills needed to persevere through the challenges that we all face as humans by building upon the unique strengths that they have that will allow them to reach their goals. So more specifically, as the late Christopher Peterson says, we must be as interested in building the best things in life as in repairing the worst. So Dr. Peterson was an influential positive psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania who helped develop an amazing strength-based tool that you may have heard of called the VIA, or the Values in Action Character Strength Survey. We'll be sure to get you the details for the survey if you're interested in learning more about it. So we want to reflect again and share in the chat here in thinking about Daunte and in thinking about operating from a strength-based approach and how to support him. How might you identify his strengths? How might you support him directly? How might you address his mental health needs? How might you support his academic needs? And for the sake of time, we're gonna move on to the next slide, but I'll keep an eye out on the chat because I do want to be sure to highlight your thoughts. And I'm going to turn it over to Byron to discuss the key elements of a strength-based approach and share what this looks like in action.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsie. And I want to really hone in on the point that in this strength-based approach, we have to place an emphasis on not ignoring where there are actual deficits. And I shared this personal story. I have 3 kids, a 9-year-old who's turning 10 this upcoming month in December. I have a 7-year-old daughter who was just like me, and she has all the energy in the world. And man, let's talk about karma. And then I have a 1-year-old who's, I think he's taking a nap right now. So I'm gonna try to keep my energy down a little bit, but we on the call with Canada, so I'm not gonna hide my energy. If he's up, he's just up and he's gonna join the call. But my 7-year-old daughter, she has some speech challenges. And so I would be doing her a disservice if I said, we're just gonna use a strength-based approach and strength it away. Like, nah, we gotta get you connected with services. We gotta get you, make sure that you're getting the skills that you need. But the key thing here is how can we acknowledge the areas where there's potential for growth, not place any limiting beliefs in her, but operate from a place of, we're going to get you where your potential will take you. What potential are we seeing in our young people? How are we connecting them with resources around them from the community, from the family, from the school that can leverage them and propel them up? So in this strength-based approach, it's essential that we are balanced and comprehensive instead of being one-sided, whether that's too deficit focused or whether it's only strength-based focus, which can also be problematic as well. But there are 4 important things in my work that I've seen in this strength-based approach. Listen, y'all, we have to be able to name and know and understand our strengths. And whenever I speak, I always try to take a pause. And you all, you might not be shocked, but most adults struggle to name 5 strengths. They'll struggle to name 3 strengths. If you ask them what's one strength, they might be able to do that. But most people will have a challenging time speaking in the affirmative of themselves. But then if you ask them what's some weaknesses, what's something you struggle with, man, let me tell you, I can't do this, I'm bad at that. I made it a habit to say how bad I am in math. Like, why is that a thing? And so in this strength-based approach, it's imperative that we're able to be able to name, know, and use our strengths. It puts people first. And for way too long, we have moved away from acknowledging the needs. We saw that comment time and time again inside of the chat. Importantly, this strength-based approach, it's about the growth. It's not about perfection. It's about progress over perfection. It's about setting goals and crushing them. And then I'm really, really big on this one, but that social capital piece. and leveraging those resources and supports around y'all. I used to say I was bad in math, but now I was resourceful because Krista, my sister-in-law, my twin, met her at Hampton. Yes, I have an identical twin. Yes, I'm the better looking twin. It's like, now I'm joking. He's a smarter twin, so I mess with him all the time. But y'all, let me tell y'all how I failed pre-calculus. We got to be honest, right? I failed pre-calculus at Hampton twice. Then I took it in the summer, and by the skin of my teeth, I got a D-. Well, how did I get a D-? Here's how I got that D-. And I needed a D- to pass, so I was happy with that, right? Growth. I was making growth. My sister-in-law was a math major. And I said, I have no clue what I'm doing, but let me use her as a resource so that I can get the skills, the basic skills that I needed to move on. And listen, sometimes we just got to leverage those resources and supports around us to help get our needs met. That's what it means to be strength-based. If you put me in a room and have me present on something, I'll knock that out all day in the paint. But you asked me to get up there and solve some math problems, Canada, listen, we both will be looking at each other. So let's keep rocking and rolling, because I want to get into what you all probably care the most about. How can we support youth and their mental health from a lens that leverages the strengths in our young people? And as Kelsie mentioned, I've been able to do some really neat work in the DMV. Shout out to Tracy. Tracy, let me know if you grew up in PG, if you worked in PG, or what the connection is there. But I'm from PG County. That's my home. Elementary, middle school, high school, and then working in DC. And so, I work with youth who look like me. And so that was important to me. And so I have always strived to meet the needs of youth who look like me. That's always been my mission. And working with youth who might be from high poverty communities, or, have all of these things, these stats that we are all aware of, I never wanted to let a student know that they could not be successful, or that you are only these labels, or that you're at risk, or all of these things. So, y'all, my hope going into these schools was to be a support to young people who look like me. And so I want to share some of those cool things that I've been able to do. And I've tried as best I could to put what I did into this approach. And at the core, it was being strength-based. And if I had to say there was this 5-step process that I followed and that Kelsie and I were on the same page on, this is the 5-step process, y'all. Are y'all ready for this? If you're not, I'm gonna give it to you anyway. The first thing, y'all, and I cheated a little bit too. Y'all have a popping website. I don't know if y'all have been to the YouthREX website, but even before I got connected with y'all, I was familiar with the website. I read a study that y'all did when I started redesigning a high school in DC around some youth participatory work. And I was like, oh, this group is with it. But anyways, the first thing, whether it was on the website, whether it was through the message board that you all had, you all talked about listening to the needs of people. Why do we get that wrong? Why don't we go to the source, y'all? What is it that you need? We fail so many times when the solution oftentimes costs you nothing. It costs you no money. It costs you getting out of your office, getting out into these educated streets and talking to people, y'all. And that's what we're talking about. You talk, you listen, you seek to understand, to build a deep level of empathy, not the mushy, ooey, gooey, putting yourself in the shoes of other people. While that's good, no, this is a deep level of empathy, of building understanding and connection to say your struggle is my struggle. And once I understand, once I listen, then we're going to move towards action. But the first step is listening deeply to the needs of youth. And I'll share some strategies of how to listen. The next thing that we have to do is recognize the needs. Now, guess what we're doing? If you're familiar with the work of Paul Gorski, we're interweaving this equity literacy framework. If you're familiar with that equity literacy framework from Gorski, put yes in the chat. And he talks about to be a threat to inequity, that's the work. And to be a threat to inequity, you have to listen, you have to recognize and respond. And that's what we're talking about here. How might we recognize the needs of our young people, y'all? Because that's the work that we're in. And then once you recognize that need, we're not finished. We can't be like, my work here is done. and then go chill. Nah, like we still have work to do. And once you listen to understand deeply, once you recognize what those needs are, y'all, we have to take action. We got to respond to those needs within our sphere of control, right? But we're doing what we can when we can with the resources that we have at our disposal. Importantly, and Kelsie, you'll appreciate this, we have to monitor and measure the impact that we're having. Why is that important? Because why would we continue doing the same thing if it's ineffective, right? And man, y'all, we talk about stats and all of these data like we know it, right? Like I could give you stats on mental health, I could give you stats on disproportionality, but you all probably have heard it 1,000 times. And so we have to be able to monitor and measure the impact and then do something about it and take action. And here's a bonus one for y'all. Practice over programs. Practice over programs. We have to be in the business of strength-based practices and not one set program, because a set program might not meet the needs of your specific demographic. But let's keep rocking and rolling for the sake of time. Yeah, I wanted to create this graph and it matches like the YouthREX like designs, which is like pretty cool. But these are those 5 steps, right? Where we listen to the needs, we recognize, we respond, we're monitoring and measuring and practicing, we're placing emphasis on practice over programs. But what's holding that up? What's holding that up is this strength-based model and this model of well-being. How many of you are familiar with the PERMA model of well-being? If you're not, it's rooted in the field, because again, I don't want y'all thinking this is just some ooey gooey, like mushy, feel good type stuff, not scientific and evidence-based. And a lot of the work stems from the field of positive psychology out of UPenn, and they studied how can we improve the well-being of people? And they landed on this model. It's called PERMA. And what this is a scientific way to increase the positive emotions from people. And Martin Seligman, who's one of the key contributors of this positive psychology, it was funny, he kind of got frustrated. One of his first books was Authentic Happiness. Let me know if anybody has read that book. It was like, y'all, so now we just want everybody to be happy? I'm a scientist. I'm a grumpy person. I'm not happy. And people got it wrong, because now everybody's just talking about happiness and emotions and feelings. And it's like, no, I'm a scientist. And we can't just get people, listen, I'm hitting my microphone. Listen, we have to be in the business of equipping people with skills and not just getting them back to a space of zero. Because y'all know why? Happiness is fleeting. Happiness doesn't last always. So what else contributes to the human condition, which is strength-based, putting the needs of people first? What else will give people a life where they can reflect back on it? Man, I led a good life. I had a meaningful life. I led a life that was engaging. What he landed on is we have to increase our engagement in life. We talk about relationships all the time. Again, how are we leveraging relationships that will bring us meaning in life? And that's the next part of this model, is meaning. What are we doing that is meaningful? What are we contributing to where we're like, man, I have purpose, y'all. I get up, I put my clothes on, and I'm ready to take on the world. Now we're talking about not just curing mental illness, we're talking about a model of well-being. And guess what happens? The A that Seligman and his team looked at. We got to talk about achievement and accomplishment, y'all. And when we put all these 5 aspects together, it gives us a scientific model of well-being. And that well-being is how we should operate from a strength-based approach to address the mental health needs of people. Listen, I am a firm believer that we should not solely be in the business of curing mental illness. If you are, we're going to get it wrong 1,000% of the time. And Seligman said the best we can do with medication, with therapy, and he provided intensive therapy and counseling as well. He said the best we can do is get people back to a level of homeostasis, of zero. And what he meant by that is, even if you can cure mental illness and all of these things, a person is zero. At what point do we add on to that? At what point do we increase flourishing and well-being and thriving to where you wake up and you're excited? Listen, how many of y'all are working in schools and you drive there in the morning and you just park and school starts at 8:05, it's 8:03, it's 8:04, and you dread going to work? Or listen, at Canada, let's get real. Now it's 5:15 and you pull up to the house. Listen, somebody, and you don't want to go inside the house. Oh, listen, I'm talking to somebody right now. But what we're talking about is not having purpose, not having meaning. But when you can tap into this model of well-being, y'all, you get up ready to go. You're like, I have a purpose. Have you ever met somebody in their purpose? Now, what if we translate these skills to our young people that we're working with? And you have a school full of kids who are thriving, who are flourishing, who understands how to tap into positive emotions, how to be engaged in schools. Man, listen, now we're talking about an evolution, y'all. And now we're evolving from YouthREX, and we're going to call it EvolveREX, right? Because now we're evolving the space of education. I don't know. We're not going to do that, but let's slow this down. Let's keep rocking and rolling for the sake of time, y'all. Y'all might be saying, like, how can I do this? It sounds great. It sounds cool. Let's break it down. The first step, the first component, gotta listen. Gotta listen to the needs of youth. Okay, but how do we listen to people? Here's 3 ways that we can listen to the needs of our young people. And these are all things, whether I've been trained on, whether I just developed these skills, or whether I just say, hey, this is something that's working. I want to share it with you. And the 3 things that I want to share with you all is youth interviews, surveys, and chat and choose. If you're looking for where to get started, start here in these strength-based interviews. And this is critical because kids, they might, but they're less likely to talk to you if they don't have a relationship with you, if they can read through you, if they're like, listen, this person could care less about me, so I'm not going to talk to this person. So it's critical to be able to establish rapport. I thought there was another slide. Here we go. It's a little bit out of order, but these are some questions that you can ask during these strength-based interviews. One of my favorite ones that I used to talk to my kids and ask, I'm not sure if it's on here, but it's after we started building a little bit of rapport. But you know, what's something that you could do that just comes easily to you? There it is in the bottom right-hand corner that nobody else can do. And I ask my kids this question all the time. For my daughter, it's gymnastics. Like, y'all, she legit taught herself how to do backflips. Like, she is amazing. And we're in Texas now, and she's at the gym with Simone Biles. Like, she's on a trajectory for the Olympics. Like, this girl is gifted. Like, if she was here now, like, she would legit be doing back flips, front flips, bridges, like, you name it, she can do it. But these are questions that we can ask. What comes easily to you? You might ask, what's working well for you in school? But getting to build a rapport and being able to listen to the young people is key. And these strength-based surveys, this is something that I did in my school just to dive a little bit deeper and to fully understand the needs, y'all. This is where I talk about building and developing empathy, to understand the needs of people. And I wanted to understand the experience of our young people inside of our school. And where I worked in Southeast DC, it was poverty-stricken, high rates of crime, ridiculous amounts of gun violence. And so I wanted to understand from my students' perspective, what is the experience like for you inside of this school? I would never know if I didn't get out and talk to them. And we completed these surveys to get their experience on what school is like. And then we made it fun. I was like, hey, let's pull out, it was just random TV. I was like, let's pull out this TV. Let's say we'll give a $25 gift card just so that you can share your voice. And this is what it looked like in action. And you could see this was a great way just to build relationships, just to laugh, just to get out there and talk with people, y'all. It's simple things that we can do. The next thing, and I have some other slides, but the last thing is a chat and chew. This is one of my favorite ones. And really what that is y'all just get some food, get some pizza, and just have lunch and talk and listen. Yeah, it's one of my favorite, like, easy things to do. And you'll get some great conversations as well. The next thing that we got to be able to do is to recognize the needs of our youth. Once you listen, once you talk to them, they share their perspectives. You got to recognize the needs of your young people. And you can recognize the needs by being crystal clear on whatever the issue or problem might be. And then be sure to, is this what you're saying? Let me repeat that back to you. And then once you can really gain certainty from their perspective, be able to develop how might we questions. And this is one of something that I found to be really useful in my work with these how might we questions. And in these how might we questions, it might look like this. In our work, we say, how might we create an environment where students feel loved, cared for, and connected to the school community? And we developed this how might we question based off of what we heard. And here's what we heard. We heard that students didn't feel wanted. They didn't feel cared for inside of the school. They felt like they didn't belong. They said that school felt like prison with all the cop cars. They had to clear metal detectors. There was no school colors. It was white walls, windows. It felt like prison. And the kids, our attendance was the lowest in the district. And our kids didn't want to go. Why would they when school feels like that? Right? How can I learn in that environment? And so we had to create this question, how might we create an environment where kids like Daunte want to come here? They feel engaged, they feel connected, they feel supported. And so that's what we had to do. When you can listen, when you can recognize the needs, you got to take action. You have to respond to the needs of your young people. And here are some awesome ways that I think we all can respond, whether you're a grad student, early career, or deep in your work. One of the best things I think we can do is to help people set goals, and even for ourselves, so that we can actually say, okay, this is the problem, this is what we're doing, then be able to measure that what you're doing is working. I'm real big on helping our young people to develop from a skill perspective, specific skills, specific strengths, whether that's critical thinking, conflict resolution, whether that's being able to name, know, and use your top 5 strengths. And we have several surveys and questionnaires to do that. Importantly, being able, you can respond to the needs of youth by leveraging resources in the community partners. Importantly, y'all, we have to do something within your sphere of control, but be biased towards action. One of the things that we did to help respond to the needs of our young people is we helped them to identify their top 5 strengths. And we did this with our staff first. And we said that if we're going to respond to the needs of our people, we have to know who we are as a staff, and we want our young people to know their strengths, to know what they're good at, to know what they're unique at. And we help them to take, we administered the Clifton Strength Finders assessment, and our young people were able to know their top 5 strengths. And so now we're creating an environment where kids feel connected, where they feel like they belong. We connected these students once they identified their strengths with a caring adult. And now we're tapping into this model of well-being through our practices inside of our school. And these are just some shots of us leveraging some of those community partnerships. Listen, I'm one person, you're one person. We have to be able to increase our capacity. And an easy way to do that is to develop relationships outside of the school. This is Trayon White, a council member in DC. And I was like, Trayon, man, this is what we need. Can you help us? And he pulled up to the school, and he helped us out. We have a great relationship to this day. We wanted to create a psychologically safe space for our young people. And so we created this peace room. And we got our community partners to support. And we said, hey, this is a list of things that we need so that we could create this safe space. And our community partners contributed to it as well. We also brought in other mental health experts to help us meet the needs around the chat and choose. So now you can see how we're bringing all of these practices in together in really a low cost way around food, with community partners so that we can meet the needs of our young people. And I wanted to go through this. How are we on time? I know that it's 12 o'clock. How are we doing on time?
I think keep going. I know that you're responding to comments and questions in the chat box. So I think we should keep going for a little while longer before we open it up.
All right, awesome. Let's keep rocking and rolling. I'm taking note of the chat. Some good stuff coming through. Yeah, the idea of the peace room. And again, I'm cheating because I saw you all's message board and two themes really came up. You all talked a lot about listening to the needs of kids, but then also being able to create safe spaces. And that's exactly what we did with that peace room. And inside of that peace room, that's where we held our restorative conversations. We brought in mindfulness. We had our peace circles and proactive circles inside that space. And when kids felt that they were about to get to a point where they were escalated, we allowed them to take a break inside of the peace room to do their work. We had special seating, we had calming lights. We brought in another community partner who specialized in like yoga and meditation, and she facilitated that room. And so, yes, that was something that we did. Again, that was, it was an empty room. And so we capitalized on that to respond to the needs of people. I wanted to show quickly, it's a really brief clip, but the story of Daunte is a very real story. And I know that we might have presented it as a hypothetical, but that was a very real thing. And at the school where I work, we had some students, all of our students who every year vicariously experience gun violence, and we would always lose a current student and an alumni student. And this year we lost a student, y'all, and that was hard. And because of the things, being able to listen to the needs of our kids, being able to recognize and respond, I remember I was providing this restorative response the day after Tommy was killed. And, our young people, we moved from a space of being desensitized towards action. And I want to show you all directly from the voice of students. Hopefully this works.
You all had to take SATs yesterday.
Yes.
While you're thinking about all this, while you're grieving the loss of your friend, what's that like having to balance all of that?
It's actually difficult to balance all of this because while you're grieving through this and like going through all these problems, you really don't have no one there in your corner to actually help you with your mental health, like state of mind and stuff like that. So you have to like go to your friends for help and things like that. And it's actually like, it's devastating. Like you have to, like because you're trying to balance, how can I be, like a respectable young adult, balancing school and balancing and like going, going through trauma. And it's just difficult because it's like you have all these obstacles put against you and you're still trying to, you're trying to like rise against that just to be the best person that you could be.
You all had to take.
And so this was our young students a few days afterwards. And speaking with this group of students, we said that we are going to respond to the violence in our community. I was like, I want to support y'all. And so what they decided to do is to say that we are going to be responsive. We are going to use our voice. And this is where I love you all's advocacy piece and agency piece. When we can do the things that I mentioned, this is the power that happens. Our kids say that we have power and we want our peace, y'all. Now we're talking about mental health. And our students said we are going to reclaim our peace. Our kids deserve peace. Our kids they're entitled to go into a school where they should only be able to be concerned about SATs, about grades, about academics, about sports, about prom, y'all, about homecoming, about things kids should be worried about. Not if I leave here today, will I make it back tomorrow, y'all? So our kids, when we pour into them, when we listen, when we can recognize, when we can respond to needs, when we can empower our young people, our kids say, we don't have to live this way. We are going to reclaim our peace. And they organized a rally, y'all. Our kids did this, who said, we're reclaiming our peace. And Trayon, we saw you come up here, come back out because we got to talk to you. Mayor Bowser, you're the mayor of DC, come out because we got to talk to you. Chancellor, we see you up there in central office, but come out. We got some things to say. The kids got something to say, Canada, because we empowered them. And here's their list of demands. They had a list of 8 demands, y'all. And guess what was at the cornerstone of this work? Mental health. And then some of these things, let me see if it's on the next slide. But here, let's see where it says, Number 5, monthly mental health checkups, y'all. And then school representatives to be more involved in students' mental and physical health, y'all. This is what our kids are saying. Listen, and so we organized this rally and people came out and supported, and our kids got up and they spoke about what their needs are and what are we doing to create spaces where our kids can get their needs met. A few days after that, the chancellor of DC Public Schools, he came and sat down with those same students, and they were able to share more detail about their needs. And one of the things that the chancellor was able to do was to create resources that we could tap into. And we got our students mental health first aid training. We also got mental health aid training for our staff as well. And we had more conversations around safe patches so our kids could feel safe going to and from school. But the key thing is this is what can happen when we listen to people, y'all. And you can see I'm in these pictures, and guess what my role was? Just to listen, to recognize the needs, and then respond within my sphere of control. And then when we can do all of those things, we have to continuously monitor and measure the impact of our work, because if we don't, did it really happen? Maybe, maybe not. Just some great ways that I think we can monitor and measure our impact. Panorama is popular. I'm not sure. Feel free to drop inside the chat some of the measures that you all are using in Canada. But Panorama is great because it measures school culture and climate. And when we recognize the needs of our kids, one of the biggest ones was sense of belonging, safety, culture, climate. And so Panorama was good because it had metrics directly aligned to that. One of our top priorities was creating a space where kids felt like they belonged. With all the different practices and measures that we put in place, we were able to look at our Panorama data to see a quarter, semester to semester, then year to year, are we making meaningful progress towards the goals that we've set? You might want to look at office discipline referrals. You might want to, we created our own goal trackers. There's an amazing site. If you just Google authentic happiness, they have like this portal that has a ton of scales and surveys. One of those is the positive affect, negative affect scale. And that's a great way to look at the positive affect, the negative affect of your young people as well. And as we start to bring this session to a close, Kelsie, is there anything that you want to add?
No, there are some great things happening in the chat right now that I hope that we can get to when you're finished. So keep going. This is awesome. And I'm keeping a hold of the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep rocking and rolling. And I do want to stress that I've created my own SEL curriculum. Like I work for. What matters, y'all, is our practice. What matters is, are we caring about the people who we work with? I want to stress practices over programs, practices over initiatives, practices over curriculums. What are we doing every single day that'll move the needle for our young people? And just quickly, here are some strength-based practices. Some of them are evidence-based, some of them are emerging in the literature, but being universal in our approach. And this might, I see someone mention in the chat, and I'll try to dive deeper into that. But it doesn't necessarily just have to be gun violence. It can be bully prevention. It can be substance abuse programs. It could be alcohol abuse programs, PBIS, maybe, right? Asterisk by that. We can have a conversation about PBIS, but school-wide SEL, what are you doing at a school-wide level to be preventative to problem behaviors and issues before they occur? And then because we work in schools in the real world, we understand that things are going to come up. How can we have targeted interventions and supports early that will support the mental health needs of our young people? Here in the States, we have a federal program, Head Start. I'm wondering what the Canadian version of that might be, but then also being able to provide intensive emotional behavioral support as well. As I said, we provided mental health literacy. That's teaching people how to identify warning signs of mental health and different symptoms. Y'all, my absolute hands down favorite positive psychology intervention is 3 good things. I did it with my kids yesterday. We do it every single day at the dinner table. And this has been a scientific way to increase rates of happiness while decreasing rates of depression. And it has longing effects. And that's simply being able to name 3 good things that happen to you over the course of your day and reflecting on it, and do that for a week. The longer you do it, the more of a positive impact it'll have. I'm moving on check in, check out. I love check in, check out. I did it with my students, do it with my staff, do it with each other. It's one of the best things that you can do. Restorative conversations. We don't talk enough. YouthREX, we got to have a conversation about social clubs, getting kids involved. This is a great way to leverage those social capital. Getting coaches involved. I didn't have an SEL curriculum growing up. I played sports. I learned a lot of these things from my family, but also from my coaches in sports. And so for a lot of the young boys who I work with, there's connections there as well. We have to be able to provide clear pathways and access so that people know how to access mental health supports. Depending on your role, we have to be in a position of taking action and providing direct services as well as indirect services. And a simple thing that we can do to be strength-based and address mental health well-being is sharing resources, sharing. And again, the YouthREX website has a ton of knowledge, of resources. The NAMI website, the National Association of School Psychologists, the SAMHSA website has a ton of resources that you can download and share with your school communities and share with your parents as well. And so I share a lot from my experience so that you all can know this work is possible. It's not just hypothetical, it's not just theoretical. It's work that I've been able to engage in, that I've seen others engage in, and that I believe we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our kids, that we must be in a space to shift from what's wrong to what's strong. Kelsie, I'll throw it to you.
My final takeaway, I know I kind of introduced us and then gave it away to Byron to share all of those amazing examples, but I also want to stress all children have strengths and it's up to us to identify them. I don't think we're doing the best job of identifying those strengths at this point. So if there's 2 things that you can take with you, it is that quote from Byron and this quote from me right here.
Yeah, so that's our time. I think we have a little bit of time for questions. This is our contact information. I know we went through this, but we would love to continue this conversation and this dialogue. This is our website, hackingdeficitthinking.com. You can shoot us an email. Absolutely follow us on social media. We're active there. Hacking Deficits across all social media. Kelsie's is at Dr. Kelsie Reed. I'm at School Psych Life on Twitter, and McClure 6 on Instagram. Tag us, share with us, send us a DM. We would love to keep this conversation going. So we would love to take any questions or anything that you that might resonate with you, or anything that we might not have been clear on.